I'd like to introduce another Carey School alumni, Steve Cameron, and his Panther Points of Pride video.
Hi, I'm Steve Cameron. I graduated from Carey High School in 1956. I lived south of the old church. Mrs. York was the first house and the Camerons lived the second house. Well, I remember that in junior high school, our ball team won the Blaine County District basketball tournament. And I have the old trophy, part of it at least. And the kids whose names are on that trophy are Steve Cameron, Larry Whitby, Granville McAllister, Delray Baird, Lewis Peck, Dick Green, Jack Fippen, Lewis Howard, Wilburn Hodges, Carl Edwards, Ronald Eldridge, and our coach was Charles Saunders. I surely enjoyed all of the teachers I had. I didn't have a single teacher in all the time I was at Carey that I didn't like or didn't learn a lot from. I surely remember Ronald Peck as my band teacher for all the time I was there. And I remember Bob Day, and he was a good teacher, and golly, who else? I remember Mr. Wicks, who was the principal. He was a good math teacher, and I think there were some students that didn't care for him all that much, but I liked him and I learned quite a bit from him. And it was interesting because when I began my teaching career in Orem, he happened to be over math student teachers from BYU. And so he was in my building supervising supervising math kids, and he and I would converse once in a while. And I was happy to know that he didn't think I was too much of a troublemaker when I was a kid in Carey. I had a lot of good friends. John Adamson was a little older, but he and I did a lot of things together. And Lewis Peck, and Dallas Justison, and Joe Dilworth, and John Barton, and Doug and Dar Park, and I remember Mr. Wilde was one of our teachers at high school. He was a history teacher, and every Friday he would have us ask him any question that we wanted to out of the history book. It was U.S. history. And so we enjoyed quizzing him about what was in that book, and he knew the answers to everything. And one Friday, it was either Doug Park or Dar Park, I don't know which one, but one of those knotheads asked this question: what's the elephant situation in Africa? And Mr. Wilde probably took 10 or 15 minutes to tell us about the elephant situation in Africa. I thought it was crazy. Well, I like to do music things. I practiced saxophone quite a bit in school, junior high and high school. And I like to ride horses. And I like to shoot rock chucks. I had a .22, and there were 2 or 3 of us that had .22s, and we would shoot rock chucks. I remember one time, Grant Pyra and I went down to Ly Hutton's place, and I parked the car, and we got out, and that entire field was full of rock chucks, that hayfield, headed for the rocks, running for the rocks. And I remember we shot till we didn't have anything left to shoot. And of course, I always had a horse as a kid. My first horse I bought from T.J. Cagle on Wood River, and the horse cost $75. I worked at Adamson's, and paid $25 a month for that horse until I had him paid for. Other things, well, I remember I was on a horse in front of the cheese factory one day in the 50s. I don't remember the date, but there was Doug and Dar and Paul Olson and I don't know, just a bunch of us riding horses and playing when the Korean War broke out. And I sure didn't know where Korea was, but I remember the day it happened, and that's where I was. I took an aptitude test in high school, and that aptitude test said that I favored being a forest ranger or a band teacher. And I wound up being a band teacher. I graduated from Carey High School in '56, and then I went to Ricks College and graduated in '58. And then I served a mission in Hong Kong till January of '61. When I was called to go on a mission, Peggy and I were engaged to be married. I hadn't even thought about going on a mission. And we got engaged that spring early at Rick's, and I went home in April for spring break, and Bishop Simpson says, "You're going on a mission." I says, "Okay." And I'm surely grateful for Peggy waiting. That mission was called for 3 years because they didn't have a language program, and we just had to go live with the Chinese and do our language training. And I learned right off the bat that if you want to learn Chinese, get a child to teach you, because older people, you know, they don't speak clearly. And Cantonese has 6 tones. There's lower even, lower going, lower rising, upper going, upper even. And if you learn words with the wrong tone, you've said a completely different word. So I think my musical ear helped me a little bit with that. And how crazy it was that my brother Dale went to the same place I went about 7 years later, and saw some of the same people that I knew and helped baptize. That was kind of crazy. 2 kids from Carey, Idaho, and we both wind up in Hong Kong. After my mission, I went to BYU, graduated in music ed in 1963, and then I started my band teaching career at Lincoln Junior High School in Orem. It was a pretty big school. I started about 100 kids a year, 7th graders. I taught 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And I taught in a couple of different schools after that, Lake Ridge Junior High and American Fork Junior High. But it was always in the same school district and pretty much with the same kinds of teachers and so forth. And I quite enjoyed that. I taught about 300 band kids a day and somewhere between 5 and 7 bands. And those were good years. We had good bands. We always could go to the district band festivals and do really well. Well, I taught 16 years in Orem, and then I taught another 16 in American Fork. The reason I moved was kind of a crazy reason and selfish on my own part, but they built a brand new high school in Orem, so there were then 2 high schools, and they didn't have enough kids to fill it, so they took all the 9th graders out of my junior high and put them in the new high school. So there were 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th in that new high school. And that irritated me because I wasn't going to have a real great band that have practiced with me for 3 years. So a job opening came open in another school in the district, and I took it. And I spent the last 16 years at American Fork Junior High. I had a few job offers to teach at high schools, but I never would do it because I didn't trust junior high school band teachers to... I mean, if you're a high school band teacher, you're at the mercy of the junior high program. And I felt real comfortable starting all these kids, and they played really well when I got through with, when they got through with junior high, and I just didn't feel like I wanted to trust somebody else to do that. So I spent my whole career in junior high school as a band director. I'd had horses as a teenager, and when we built this house in Highland, it's on 1.25 acres, and so I had room for horses here. And over the course of the years from about 1975 to 5 years ago, I bought about 65 head of, I've counted them, there was, I think, maybe a few more than 65 head of foxtrotter colts I bought and trained them and sold them. And that was always a pleasure to me because I like to mess with colts. And now I don't do that, but I am a volunteer for the church's cattle ranch in Vernon, Utah. That's in Tooele County, south of Tooele. The church has a ranch out there that's 220,000 acres big, and they run 1,000 mother cows. And they have a ranch foreman and 1 hired hand. And all of the rest of the help is either missionaries or volunteers like myself. So the last, this will be 14 years this season that I've helped them. And, it's pastures are big, and there's about 300 cows in a pasture and with their calves, and we just move them all summer long from one place to another every, few weeks. So that's been fun. I'm still riding horses. Roy and Carl Payne had cattle, and before I even married Peggy, I was helping them move cows off the desert and up to the domain, up on the hill north and a little bit east of Trap Edwards's. And those were fun years. And some years I'd be working at the Texaco in Carey, and they'd need my horse, so they'd borrow my horse and use it, and I'd have to work. But after Peggy and I got married, I guess we must have moved cattle every year on the 15th of June in Carey until even after Dick took over. We'd go just faithfully. And I had a dear friend, Delbert Christensen, who I'd never met before we were missionaries. He was from Downey, and we met in the mission field in Hong Kong, became good friends. It was funny because in Carey, especially my junior and senior year in high school, I had hay fever. And I don't remember being able to play football my senior year because I'd run around that track and I'd wheeze, and it just wasn't worth it. So anyway, when I went on my mission, I had a big package of medication for hay fever. And I got to Hong Kong, and the climate's totally different than Carey, and I didn't have a drop of hay fever all the time I served over there. But this Delbert Christensen from Downey, who was a farm kid, been in hay fields all his life, he got to Hong Kong and he had hay fever. So I gave him all my medication, and and he used it in Hong Kong. That was funny. Well, I certainly felt like I was ready to leave Carey High School until I got to Rick's and found out that my English wasn't very good, or, the nouns and verbs and pronouns and all that kind of stuff, diagramming sentences. And I'd had that, but I wound up in a bonehead English class for the first quarter and had a great teacher. Her name was Mrs. Barris. And she put me in her bonehead English class, and then after the first quarter or semester, whatever it was, she says, well, you're doing just fine. You can go in my other class. So I remediated myself as quickly as I could. Well, after I retired from teaching school, there was a period of about 4 years where I had some pretty serious health problems. I had open heart surgery. I had brachytherapy, prostate cancer, and I had 2 kidneys removed and 1 kidney put in. And that all happened in a pretty short period of time. My wife says I'm a new guy now. I'll probably live forever with all these new parts I got. Our oldest boy gave me one of his kidneys. But you just never give up. I'm a fighter. I'm not going to give up. We got through all of those operations. A kidney is supposed to weigh 8 ounces. And I had one that weighed 3 pounds and one that weighed 4 pounds. And they took those out in the early part of the summer, let me heal up. I was on dialysis for some time, and then they took a kidney out of my boy, and he's done just great ever since, and I've done great with, he's got one and I got one. But I think you just keep plugging away, you never give up, And of course I realize now that medicine is so much better than it was many years ago. My mother died of polycystic kidney disease. She inherited that, I think, from the Ainsworths on her mother's side, but there were Pyras that had kidney trouble. And my brother, Dale Cameron, and my sister Marie Cameron Rasmussen both had the same ailment. And Dale died before he ever got a transplant. And Marie has had a transplant, and she's doing pretty good. So it's really marvelous to know that these kinds of things can happen. Because my mother died, let's see, in the 60s. Yeah, she died in the 60s, and there wasn't anything like transplants, So we're pretty blessed, pretty fortunate to live now. I think it's pretty hard in most cases for a high school kid to realize how important his education is. I always did well in high school at the things I liked, and the things I didn't care for too much, I could have done a lot better with. And if there is any kid in high school in Carey at this time who isn't kind of got his heart in his studies, I'd encourage you to do it, because you'll regret it. Everybody isn't designed to go to college physically and so forth, What's the matter with a trade school? Everybody isn't going to be an English professor or a history teacher in college. Somebody's got to fix the refrigerator, and somebody's got to fix the tap and put a toilet in. And I just think that sometimes we don't explore all of the things that are around us, so that we, realize that there are many opportunities besides just going to college. I haven't got one kid that graduated from college out of 7 kids. I mean, a university like the University of Utah or BYU. But every one of them is successful and makes a decent living at what they do. And I think you just have to have a personal drive and have a little ambition, and you'll be successful at whatever you want to do. I was always interested in dance bands and just loved to listen to this band. which was my Uncle Al Pyra. And that's Uncle Al here, and Ross Dix on the drums, and Don Dilworth on alto, and my dad, Bud Cameron, on the banjo, and Don Tullock on piano. And in the, let's see, it would have been the, what year did I graduate? 50s. In the 1950s, the stake president asked Uncle Al to put a band together, and the band would play in Shoshone one week and Sun Valley another week or whatever. There was a schedule, and that's how they paid for a lot of the money that went to build the Sun Valley Chapel. And this band, not that band, but the one Uncle Al put together when I was in high school, played for those dances. And I can't remember now whether I played alto or tenor, but Al played one and I played the other one. And I remember Lewis Peck was the drummer, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who else played in that. But that gave me a taste for playing dance band music. And I always remember Uncle Al saying that when the notes are all right and all of the rhythms are together, it's going to sound great. And I even taught all my own band kids with that same philosophy. So after I graduated from BYU and started to teach, I played in dance bands. I played with Dick Long's orchestra for probably 15 years. I played with CB Jazz for 20 years. And I'd play clarinet and alto and tenor and baritone sax in a lot of those instances. And that was a lot of fun. I played for years with the Danny Newell All-Stars. And when you've got an 18-piece band, 5 saxes, 4 trombones, 5 trumpets, piano, drums, and bass, that sounds pretty good. And I enjoyed that over the years. I'm still involved playing. I'll be 80 next month, and I'm still playing. The last 12 seasons I've played with the Wasatch Winds concert band. There's a 60-piece concert band that's sponsored by American Fork City. It's crazy. There's a lot of music down here. American Fork City has a symphony orchestra, and they have a concert band. And our season starts in October and goes till May. And we play about 6 concerts a year. And it sounds pretty good. I started out playing clarinet with them, and then they needed a bass clarinet, so I bought a bass clarinet, and for at least 10 years I've been playing bass clarinet with Wasatch Winds. It's been fun. I've really enjoyed it. It's got to be my family. I married absolutely wonderful angel, Peggy Payne, and we've been blessed with 7 kids. And none of them's in jail, none of them's on drugs, none of them's doing crazy stuff. They're all successful at what they do. They've all got families of their own. And hands down, the greatest contribution I've made, I think, is, even with all my weaknesses, is just being a dad and a husband. This picture up here on our kitchen wall is precious to me. These are grandchildren. And you'd have to ask Peggy how many greats we got. It's a dozen or something. I remember Evan Pyra, Bolly Pyra, my uncle, once telling me and Carey, if you haven't got a family, you haven't got very much. And I've never forgotten that. Families are pretty wonderful. I'm Steve Cameron, and I graduated from Carey High School in 1956.